The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with quiet conversation as delegates from 27 different worlds took their seats. Ambassador Kelthera smoothed her blue-scaled hands over the ancient text she carried, its pages yellow with age and brittle from countless readings. Today was different. Today she would share something that had puzzled her people for generations. The council speaker, a tall being with 4 arms and silver skin, called for silence. His voice echoed through the massive chamber carved from a single asteroid. The floor recognizes Ambassador Kelthera of the Valian Empire. Kelthera stood and walked to the center of the hall. Around her, representatives from across the galaxy watched with mild interest. Some looked bored. Others whispered among themselves about trade routes and mining rights. None of them expected what she was about to say. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "For 3,000 years, my people have kept records of strange stories. Stories that came from travelers, refugees, and explorers who claimed to have met beings unlike any of us." She opened the ancient book, its binding creaking. "These stories speak of a race called humans. They come from a world they call Terra, or Earth. The stories say this world orbits a yellow star in a system called Sol." A few delegates shifted in their seats. The Zephyrian scholar Vexilon leaned forward, his large eyes blinking slowly. He had heard similar tales in his own research. "The stories describe these humans as strange creatures," Kelthara continued. "They have no scales, no fur, no natural armor. Their skin is soft and easily damaged. They are not the strongest or fastest beings, yet the tales claim they became the masters of their world." She turned a page carefully. "Listen to this account from a trader named Mortek, recorded 2,000 years ago. The human showed me a small device that captured images of light. When I asked how it worked, she laughed and said her people had learned to trap lightning itself. She claimed they had split the very atoms that make up matter, creating explosions brighter than stars." Murmurs rippled through the hall. The delegate from the crystalline worlds made a sound like breaking glass, their version of laughter. "Surely these are children's stories," they said through their translator. "No species could harness such forces without destroying themselves." Kelthera nodded. "That is what we thought, but there are hundreds of such accounts, all describing the same impossible beings." She turned more pages. Here, a refugee named Kesara writes, "The humans I met could show kindness that brought tears to my eyes. They shared their food when they had little. They risked their lives to save strangers. Yet in the same breath, they spoke casually of wars where millions died, of weapons that could burn entire cities, of battles fought in the void between stars." The hall grew quieter. Even the bored delegates were listening now. The stories paint these humans as contradictions, Kelthera said. Beings of both incredible compassion and terrible violence. They are described as creators and destroyers, peacemakers and warriors, all in the same body. Vexilon stood up. "Honored speaker, may I add to this testimony?" The speaker nodded, and the elderly scholar approached the center. His walking stick tapped against the stone floor with each step. "In my 40 years of research," Vexilon began, "I have found similar accounts in the archives of 12 different species. The descriptions are remarkably consistent, despite coming from different times and places across the galaxy." He pulled out a small device and projected images into the air above them. Rough drawings and faded photographs appeared, all showing the same type of creature. Tall, bipedal, with soft skin and strange hair covering only parts of their bodies. According to these accounts, Vexilon continued, humans supposedly walked on their own moon before they learned to travel between stars. They tamed fire when they were primitive, built machines that could think, and created art that could make other beings weep. But the most consistent detail, he said, his voice dropping lower, is their capacity for war. Every account speaks of their skill in battle, not just personal combat, but massive conflicts involving entire populations. They apparently fought wars on land, sea, air, and in space. Some accounts claim they fought wars with weapons that could poison entire worlds. A nervous silence fell over the hall. The delegate from the hive clusters, speaking through their swarm voice, asked the question many were thinking. If these humans are real, where are they? Why have we never encountered them? Kelthera closed her book. The accounts suggest their homeworld is in an area we consider dead space. The Sol system, if it exists, shows no signs of advanced civilization when scanned from long range. Most of our surveys show it as empty. Which is why, Vexilon added, most scholars believe these are just stories, myths created by mixing different species' experiences. After all, no single race could possess all the contradictory traits described in these accounts. The council speaker raised 2 of his 4 hands. This has been most interesting, but surely the assembly has more pressing matters than ancient stories? Just then, a communications officer hurried into the hall. Her movements were urgent, almost panicked. She whispered something to the speaker, whose silver skin darkened with concern. "What is it?" asked the delegate from the thermal worlds. The speaker stood slowly. "It seems our deep space monitoring stations have detected something unusual. Radio signals from the direction of the Sol system. Very old-style transmissions, but they match the theoretical language patterns described in these human myths." The hall erupted in surprised voices. Some delegates laughed, claiming it was impossible. Others demanded more information. A few looked genuinely worried. Kelthara felt her heart's beating faster. "What kind of signals?" "Music. The communications," officer said, her voice barely audible above the noise. "Mathematical sequences, and what our computers identify as literature being broadcast into space. The signals are old, some dating back thousands of years, but they're still coming from that system." The laughter died away. Even the skeptics looked troubled now. "There's more," the officer continued. "Long-range sensors detect artificial structures around the 3rd planet, massive orbital installations, surface cities, and what appears to be regular space traffic." The silence that followed was complete. For several long moments, no one spoke. Finally, the delegate from the Maritime Federation asked what everyone was thinking. "You mean the Sol system isn't dead?" "No, sir," the officer replied. "It's very much alive." The speaker looked around the hall at the worried faces of the delegates. "It seems we may need to investigate these stories more seriously." Kelthera looked down at her ancient book, its pages filled with impossible tales of beings who walked like legends through the galaxy. Tales of creatures who could be angels and demons in the same breath. Tales that spoke of a species that had touched every corner of known space, leaving stories and mysteries in their wake. For 3,000 years, they had been just stories. Myths to entertain children or puzzle scholars. But now, somewhere in the direction of Sol, radio waves carried music across the void. Somewhere out there, the humans might be real. And if the stories were true, if even half of what the accounts claimed was accurate, then the galaxy was about to change forever. The question was whether that change would bring peace or war, salvation or destruction. In the end, Kelthera thought, perhaps that was the most human trait of all, the uncertainty of what they would choose to be. 3 weeks after the signals were discovered, a joint expedition of 5 ships approached the Sol system. Dr. Yith Massa, the expedition's lead xenoarchaeologist, stood on the bridge of the research vessel Deep Scanner and watched the view screen with growing amazement. What they had expected to find was ruins. What they saw instead was impossible. The 3rd planet from the star glowed blue and green, wrapped in swirling white clouds. Artificial lights dotted the night side of the world in patterns too organized to be natural. Orbital stations hung in space around the planet like metal moons, and ships moved between them in steady streams. "This can't be right," muttered Captain Vorthek, his tentacles twitching with nervousness. Long-range scans showed this system was dead. "Long-range scans can be fooled," Dr. Yithmasa replied, her scientific excitement overcoming her caution. Or perhaps they weren't looking in the right spectrum. The ships had barely entered the outer system when alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. Their tactical officer, a young Valian named Kessatar, looked up from his instruments with wide eyes. Captain, we're being scanned. Multiple sources, very sophisticated technology. They know we're here. Before anyone could respond, their communications array crackled to life. A voice spoke in clear, unaccented galactic standard. Unknown vessels. This is Earth Defense Control. You have entered restricted space. Please state your intentions. The bridge fell silent. Someone on that distant planet not only knew they were there but could speak their language perfectly. Captain Vorthek activated the communication system with shaking hands. This is Captain Vorthek of the Galactic Council research vessel Deep Scanner. We are a peaceful scientific expedition investigating radio signals from your system. There was a pause. Then the voice returned, somehow managing to sound both professional and amused. Captain Vorthek, this is Commander Jackson at Earth Defense Control. We've been expecting someone like you for quite some time. Please maintain your current position while we dispatch a diplomatic vessel to meet you. Dr. Yithmasa leaned forward. Commander Jackson, are you human? This time the pause was longer. When the voice returned, there was definite amusement in it. Yes, Doctor, we are human. And unless I'm very much mistaken, you're here because you found some very old stories about us. Before anyone could answer, their sensors detected a new ship approaching from the planet. It was sleek and elegant, clearly designed for both beauty and function. As it drew closer, Dr. Yithmasa could see that its design was unlike anything in the galactic database. It moved with a grace that suggested very advanced technology. The ship docked with their vessel with surprising gentleness. Moments later, the airlock cycled open, and 3 figures stepped through. The first was clearly the leader, a female with short dark hair and calm eyes. She wore a simple but elegant uniform in blue and gold. Behind her came a male with graying hair and kind eyes carrying what appeared to be scientific equipment. The third was younger, also male, with the alert bearing of a security officer. I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Prometheus, the woman said, extending her hand in what Dr. Yithmasa recognized from the old stories as a human greeting gesture. This is Dr. Marcus Webb, our xenobiologist, and Lieutenant Torres, my aide. Dr. Yithmasa carefully took the offered hand, noting how warm and soft human skin felt compared to her own scaled hide. I am Dr. Yithmasa, expedition leader. Captain Chen, I must ask, how do you know our language? Captain Chen smiled, and Dr. Yithmasa was struck by how the expression transformed her face. We've been monitoring galactic communications for over 2 centuries, Doctor. We've learned quite a lot about your various cultures and languages. But why didn't you make contact sooner? Asked Captain Vorthek. Because we weren't sure how you'd react to us, Dr. Webb answered, his voice gentle. From what we could observe, most galactic species had heard stories about humans, but they seemed to think we were myths. We thought it might be better to wait until you were ready to find us. Captain Chen gestured to the conference room they had prepared. Perhaps we should sit and talk properly. I suspect you have many questions. As they settled around the table, Dr. Yithmasa pulled out her datapad and activated her recording device. Captain Chen, the stories about your people, are they true? Which stories? Chen asked. All of them. The contradictory ones, the impossible ones. Stories of incredible kindness and terrible violence. Stories of technology that sounds like magic. Captain Chen exchanged glances with Dr. Webb. Doctor, what if I told you that the stories probably underestimate us in both directions? What do you mean? Dr. Webb leaned forward. We've analyzed the accounts you've collected over the centuries. Some of them were clearly written by humans who were trying very hard not to frighten the people they met. Others were written by people who only saw us at our worst. But they're based on real encounters? Dr. Yithmasa pressed. Oh yes, Captain Chen nodded. For the past 3,000 years, humans have been traveling the galaxy. Not officially, you understand. Individuals, small groups, sometimes refugees or explorers who got lost. Most of them tried to blend in and live quietly. But some didn't, Lieutenant Torres added quietly. Captain Chen's expression grew more serious. Some were criminals fleeing Earth justice. Others were soldiers from our various wars who couldn't adapt to peace. A few were simply unstable individuals who should never have been allowed off-world. Dr. Webb activated a holographic display. We've been tracking these stories for generations. Every account, every sighting, every tale. We estimate that over the centuries, roughly 10,000 humans have had contact with galactic civilization. 10,000, Dr. Ythmasa whispered. But the genetic diversity required to establish colonies. Oh, we didn't establish colonies, Captain Chen interrupted. Most of our people who encountered your civilizations integrated into them, married locals, raised families, contributed to their adopted societies. Their descendants are probably still out there. Captain Vorthek looked troubled. You mean there are part human beings living throughout the galaxy? Almost certainly, Dr. Webb confirmed. Human genetics are surprisingly compatible with many species. It's one of the things that made integration so easy for our wayward travelers. Dr. Ythmasa felt her understanding of galactic history shifting. The technological advances that some worlds experienced, the sudden leaps in science or engineering, probably had human influence, Captain Chen agreed. Our people couldn't help themselves. They saw problems and tried to solve them. They saw suffering and tried to relieve it. They saw beauty and tried to preserve it. And when they saw threats? Asked Captain Vorthek quietly. The three humans exchanged glances again. Captain Chen's voice became very careful. Humans have always been protective of those they care about, Captain. Sometimes that protection required decisive action. The room fell quiet. Dr. Ythmasa thought about all the stories of human warriors, of their tactical brilliance, of their willingness to sacrifice everything for others. The Galactic Council would like to extend a formal invitation to Earth, she said finally. We would be honored to welcome humanity into our community of worlds. Captain Chen smiled again, but this time Dr. Ythmasa noticed it didn't quite reach her eyes. We would be delighted to accept, Doctor. Though I should warn you. Yes? The stories you've collected? They're about individuals or small groups. You've never seen what humans can do when we work together, when we're organized, when we're united in purpose. Is that a threat? Captain Vorthek asked nervously. Not at all, Captain Chen replied, her smile becoming warmer. It's just something to keep in mind. The humans you've heard about were droplets of water. You're about to meet the ocean. Dr. Ythmasa looked at the three beings sitting across from her. They seemed so ordinary, so peaceful, but something in their calm confidence reminded her of the old stories, of the accounts that spoke of humans as sleeping giants who could become forces of nature when awakened. Captain Chen, she said, what do you hope to gain from joining galactic civilization? The same thing we've always wanted, Doctor, Chen replied. To learn, to grow, to help where we can, to find our place among the stars. She paused, then added quietly, and to make sure that the 10,000 who came before us didn't sacrifice everything for nothing. As Dr. Ythmasa looked at these representatives of a species she had thought were myths, she couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to change in ways none of them could imagine. The humans seemed friendly, eager to cooperate, ready to contribute to the greater good. But she remembered the stories, all of them, and she wondered what would happen if someone ever gave these peaceful, reasonable people a reason to stop being. Peaceful and reasonable. The thought should have been reassuring, instead it terrified her. 6 months had passed since humanity's formal introduction to the Galactic Council, and things were going better than anyone had expected. Human diplomats worked easily with alien counterparts, human scientists shared knowledge freely, and human merchants established trade routes that benefited everyone involved. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in her office on Nexus Prime, watching the bustling spaceport through her window. Human and alien ships moved together in carefully coordinated patterns carrying goods, people, and ideas across the galaxy. It was exactly what Earth had hoped for when they revealed themselves. But not everyone in the galaxy was happy with humanity's arrival. In the Outer Rim territories, Warlord Thaxmore of the Catherian hegemony stood in his command chamber, his massive form radiating anger. His species resembled giant insects with chitinous armor and multiple arms that could tear through steel. For 1,000 years, The Catherians had expanded their territory by conquering weaker worlds. They ruled through fear and superior firepower. These humans are a threat, Thaxmore rumbled to his war council. They arrive with their soft skin and gentle words, but look what they do. They make allies of our enemies. They share technologies that make weak worlds strong. They offer alternatives to our rule. His military advisor, General Klexfor, nodded agreement. Our intelligence reports are troubling, Warlord. 3 worlds that were ready to surrender to us have refused since the humans offered them protection. The humans call it mutual defense agreements. Thaxmore's mandibles clicked with irritation. The other species see these humans as saviors. They think human kindness makes them powerful. They're wrong. Kindness is weakness. The galaxy has forgotten that strength is the only truth. What do you propose, Warlord? Asked another advisor. We remind the galaxy why they should fear us, Thaxmore replied. And we show them that these legendary humans bleed just like any other species. His plan was simple and brutal. Intelligence reports showed that the humans were sending a colony ship called the New Horizon to establish their first settlement outside Earth space. The ship carried 50,000 human civilians, including families with children. It would be lightly defended, expecting safe passage through what the Galactic Council considered peaceful space. The New Horizon never made it to its destination. The attack came without warning as the colony ship traveled through the Kepler system. Catherian warships dropped out of hyperspace in a carefully planned ambush. The New Horizon managed to send one desperate transmission before its communications array was destroyed. Mayday, Mayday, this is the New Horizon. We are under attack by Catherian forces. They're targeting civilian areas. They're not taking prisoners. The transmission reached Earth through quantum communication relays designed for instant contact across the galaxy. Within minutes, the emergency broadcast was playing on every screen on Earth and throughout human space. President Morrison sat in the Oval Office, her face pale as she watched the footage that had been transmitted before the New Horizon's destruction. Catherian soldiers moving through the ship's corridors, executing civilians who begged for mercy, children crying for parents who would never answer, families holding each other as they died. Madam President, her military advisor said quietly, we're receiving reports that some survivors were taken prisoner. The Catherians are broadcasting their executions to intimidate other species. Morrison closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, something had changed in her expression, something that would have been familiar to anyone who had read the old stories about what humans could become when pushed too far. General Harrison, she said, her voice deadly calm, activate Protocol Omega. Madam President, are you certain? Protocol Omega hasn't been used since the resource wars. 50,000 civilians, General, families, children. Yes, I'm certain. Within hours, messages went out to every human settlement, every human ship, every human citizen throughout the galaxy. The messages were simple. Come home. Now. The Galactic Council tried to understand what was happening as human civilians began leaving their jobs, their homes, their alien friends, and heading back to human space. Human merchants abandoned profitable trade routes. Human scientists left important research projects. Human diplomats politely excused themselves from negotiations and departed. Ambassador Kelthara found Ambassador Vasquez packing her office. Elena, what's happening? Where is everyone going? Vasquez looked up from the box she was filling with personal items. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. We're going home, Kelthara. But why? The Council is preparing sanctions against the Catherians. We'll demand justice for what happened to your colony ship. Vasquez stopped packing and looked at her alien friend. Kelthara, you've read the old stories about my people. What do they say happens when you hurt someone a human cares about? They say humans become dangerous, but those are just stories. No, Vasquez said quietly. Those are warnings. The galaxy watched in growing confusion as humans disappeared from public life. Trade routes that depended on human ships fell silent. Research projects ground to a halt. Diplomatic initiatives stalled as human representatives simply vanished. Then the reports began coming in from human space. Ships were arriving at Earth and the other human worlds at an unprecedented rate. Not just civilian vessels, but something else. Ships that had been registered as cargo haulers and passenger liners began shedding their outer hulls, revealing sleek warships underneath. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching as the greatest military fleet in human history assembled around Earth. For 50 years he had commanded merchant vessels, keeping his military training and his warship carefully hidden. Now, like thousands of other human civilians, he had returned to his true calling. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "all vessels are in position. We have confirmation from Home Fleet, Colonial Defense Forces, and the Deep Range Squadrons. Total strength, 8,000 ships." Kane nodded. The galaxy had no idea what they were looking at. To alien observers, it might seem like a large but unremarkable fleet. They had no way of knowing that every human cargo ship had been designed to convert to military configuration. They couldn't see the weapon systems hidden in civilian hulls, the armor concealed beneath peaceful exteriors, the soldiers who had spent decades disguised as farmers and teachers and shopkeepers. "Sir," another officer said, "we're receiving the final authorization from Earth Command." Kane took a deep breath. "All ships, this is Admiral Kane. You know why we're here. 50,000 of our people were murdered for the crime of seeking a new home. Men, women, children, killed by creatures who thought we were weak because we chose peace." He looked out at the fleet stretching beyond the horizon of space. "Today we remind the galaxy why our ancestors conquered a world, why they walked on airless moons, why they split atoms and tamed lightning. Today, we show them what humans do when you threaten our families." The fleet began to move, 8,000 ships accelerating toward hyperspace. Their destination, the Cytherian home system. On Nexus Prime, Dr. Ythmasa watched the sensor readings with growing horror. Her instruments showed what appeared to be the largest military mobilization in galactic history emerging from human space. "This can't be right," she whispered to her assistant. "The humans don't have a military, they're peaceful traders and scientists." Her assistant, a young Zephyrian named Kesselon, looked up from his console. "Doctor, I'm reading weapon signatures from those ships that don't match anything in our databases. The energy readings are immense." Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council called emergency sessions. Alien leaders who had dismissed the old stories about human warriors suddenly found themselves rereading ancient texts with new urgency. Warlord Thaxmore received the reports in his fortress on the Cytherian homeworld. His advisors were panicking, but he remained confident. "Let them come," he growled. "We have fought 1,000 campaigns across 1,000 worlds. What can these soft-skinned mammals do to us?" He would have his answer soon enough. The human fleet reached the edge of Cytherian space exactly 72 hours after the attack on the New Horizon. As they dropped out of hyperspace and began their final approach to Mordak, Admiral Kane opened a channel to the Cytherian command center. "Warlord Thaxmore," he said, his voice carrying across the void between worlds. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Human Expeditionary Force. You killed our families. You murdered our children. You thought we were weak because we chose peace over war." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You were wrong. The battle for Mordak began at dawn on the Cytherian homeworld, though dawn and dusk meant little in the void of space where the real fighting took place." Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching as 8,000 human warships arranged themselves in formations that had been practiced in secret for decades. Warlord Thaxmore commanded the defense from his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, a massive dreadnought that had crushed resistance on 50 different planets. Around him, the Cytherian warfleet deployed in their traditional battle formation, one that had brought them victory for 1,000 years. "Look at them," Thaxmore rumbled to his officers, watching the human ships on his tactical display. "They spread out like frightened prey animals. They don't understand real warfare." His tactical officer, General Klexvor, studied the alien formation with growing unease. "Warlord, their positioning doesn't match any known military doctrine. It's random. Because they're amateurs," Thaxmore replied with contempt. "They may have numbers, but we have experience. Begin the attack. The Catherian fleet moved forward in their classic hammer and anvil formation, massive ships advancing in perfect lines, ready to smash through enemy resistance with pure firepower. It was a strategy that had never failed them. It failed now. The human formation, which had looked scattered and confused, suddenly revealed its true nature. What the Catherians had seen as random positioning was actually a three-dimensional web, with ships placed at carefully calculated points throughout local space. As the Catherian fleet advanced, they found themselves not facing an enemy line but surrounded by a sphere of human warships. "Impossible," General Klexivor whispered, watching his tactical display as human ships appeared on all sides of the Catherian formation. How did they move so fast? Admiral Kane smiled grimly as he watched his plan unfold. "All ships, execute Aurora Protocol. Show them why we named this formation after the lights that dance around our homeworld." The human fleet opened fire, but not in the brutal, straightforward manner the Catherians expected. Instead of trying to destroy enemy ships with raw firepower, the humans targeted specific systems with surgical precision. Weapons arrays went dead, engines failed, communication systems died. Catherian ships found themselves crippled but intact, drifting helplessly in space. "What are they doing?" Thaxmore demanded, watching his mighty fleet being systematically disabled. "Why don't they just destroy us?" Captain Sarah Chen, now commanding the tactical cruiser Earth's Fury, answered his question over an open channel. "Because, Warlord, we're not monsters. Your people are warriors, not civilians. There's a difference." But the battle was far from over. The Catherian planetary defense systems came online, massive orbital platforms bristling with weapons designed to turn attacking fleets into debris, clouds. These installations had protected Mordak for centuries, making the homeworld seemingly invulnerable. That protection lasted exactly 17 minutes. Commander Lisa Park watched from the bridge of the UES Thunder as her ship's main weapon charged. The ship's hull sections retracted, revealing something that made no sense to alien observers. What appeared to be a solid metal rod, perhaps a meter wide and 10 meters long. "Magnetic acceleration at maximum," her weapons officer reported. "Target locked on primary defense platform." "Fire," Park commanded. The rod launched from the ship's railgun at a significant fraction of light speed, striking the orbital platform with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The kinetic energy alone was enough to vaporize the entire structure. "Reload," Park ordered calmly. "Next target." Across the human fleet, similar weapons opened fire. The Catherians watched in horror as their supposedly impregnable defenses were destroyed one by chunks of metal moving at incredible speeds. "How is this possible?" General Klexivor asked, his voice barely controlled. "Those are just pieces of iron." Admiral Kane's voice crackled over the communication system. "Iron moving fast enough becomes the deadliest weapon in the universe, General. We learned that lesson a long time ago." Warlord Thaxmore tried to rally his forces for a counterattack, but the humans had anticipated every move. When Catherian reinforcements arrived from the outer system, they found human submarines waiting for them in hyperspace itself, somehow able to attack ships while they were traveling faster than light. When the Catherians tried to use their numerical advantage by calling up their reserve fleets from conquered worlds, they discovered that those fleets were already under attack by human forces that had seemingly appeared from nowhere. "Sir," a communications officer reported to Thaxmore, "we're receiving distress calls from Catherian colonies throughout the sector. Human ships are hitting our supply lines, our shipyards, our command centers. They're everywhere at once." Thaxmore stared at his tactical displays in growing disbelief. His 1,000-year empire was being systematically dismantled by an enemy he had dismissed as primitive. "How many ships do these humans have?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Yith Massa, monitoring the battle from the Galactic Council's observation post, had been analyzing the human fleet movements. "They don't have more ships," she transmitted to the Catherian command center. "They're just using them better." She pulled up her analysis on the holographic display. "Every human ship is operating independently, making its own tactical decisions while coordinating with the overall strategy." They're not following predetermined battle plans, they're adapting in real time. General Klexvor looked at the data with growing understanding and fear. They're thinking. Every ship's commander is thinking for themselves and working with the others. How is that possible? The answer lay in human military doctrine developed through centuries of warfare on their homeworld. Unlike other species that relied on rigid command structures and predetermined strategies, humans had learned to trust individual commanders to make critical decisions in the heat of battle. Captain Chen demonstrated this as she led her squadron in a seemingly impossible maneuver, diving through a field of orbital debris to strike at a Catherian command ship. Her officers didn't wait for orders. They anticipated what needed to be done and did it. "Target their command tower," Chen ordered. "Navigation, get us in close. Weapons, precision strikes only. Engineering, reroute power from life support to shields." "Ma'am," her navigator said, "that approach vector will take us through their defensive grid. The chances of survival are maybe 30%. "Then we'd better make those 30% count," Chen replied. The Earth's fury dove through, the enemy fire, its crew working together with a coordination that amazed alien observers. They had trained for this mission their entire careers, but more than that, they understood what they were fighting for. When the ship's communications officer took a piece of shrapnel in the shoulder but continued working his station, Chen didn't need to order medical assistance. The ship's doctor was already there. When the engineer reported system failures, the crew rerouted power without waiting for orders. They moved like parts of a single organism, each person knowing their job and trusting everyone else to do theirs. The precision strike on the Catherian command ship succeeded, crippling their tactical coordination. But the cost was high. The Earth's fury limped away from the engagement with heavy damage and 12 dead crew members. Captain Chen stood in the ship's memorial hall an hour later, looking at the photos of the fallen. Her communications officer, Ensign Williams, died at his post, making sure the final attack coordinates were transmitted. Lieutenant Commander Ross had stayed in engineering to prevent a reactor breach, saving the ship at the cost of his own life. "They died for people they'll never meet," she said quietly to her first officer. "For human children on distant worlds, who will grow up safe because 12 good people gave their lives today." The battle raged for 18 hours, but the outcome became clear much sooner. The Catherian fleet, designed for conquest through overwhelming force, couldn't adapt to an enemy that fought like no one they had ever encountered. Their rigid tactics crumbled against human flexibility. Their numerical advantages meant nothing when human ships struck from unexpected angles with impossible precision. As his flagship began to fail around him, Warlord Thaxmore made his final transmission. "I don't understand. We are the greatest warriors in the galaxy. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. How are you defeating us?" Admiral Kane's reply was broadcast across the entire system. "Because, Warlord, you fight for conquest. We fight for each other." The destroyer of worlds exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the night sky of Mordak. With their leader dead and their fleet shattered, Catherian resistance collapsed, but the humans weren't finished. As Admiral Kane surveyed the wreckage of the enemy fleet, he opened a channel to the surviving Catherian forces. "This is Admiral Kane to all Catherian vessels. You have a choice. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the laws of war. Your wounded will be healed. Your prisoners will be fed. Your families will be protected." He paused, letting them consider the offer. "Or continue fighting and learn what happens when you threaten human children." The surrender came within minutes. 1 year after the Battle of Mordak, the Great Hall of the Galactic Council looked very different. The chamber had been rebuilt, expanded to accommodate new realities. Where once 27 species had gathered around a circular table, now, representatives from dozens of worlds sat in a more complex arrangement, with humanity holding a position that reflected their new status in galactic affairs. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the hall, no longer the curious newcomer she had been 2 years ago. The gentle diplomat who had once packed her belongings with tears in her eyes had been replaced by someone harder, more confident. The galaxy had learned what humans could do when pushed to war. Now it was learning what they could do in peace. The former Catherian territories have been fully integrated into the Terran Protection Zone, she reported to the Assembly. All 23 worlds have voted to remain under human administration. Crime rates have dropped by 60%, agricultural production has increased by 40%, and literacy rates are approaching galactic standard levels. Emperor Zalthek of the Andromedian sovereignty leaned forward in his crystalline chair. His species had ruled a vast empire for millennia through careful diplomacy and subtle manipulation. He had watched the rise of humanity with a mixture of respect and caution. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, his voice like singing crystal. "These improvements are remarkable. But many of us are curious about your methods. How do you maintain order in territories that were once ruled through fear?" Vasquez smiled, and those who had known her before the war recognized the expression as distinctly different from her old smiles. This one carried weight, authority, and something that might have been warning. "We give them something the Catherians never did, Your Majesty. We give them hope." She activated a holographic display showing images from the former Catherian worlds. Cities being rebuilt, schools opening their doors, hospitals treating patients regardless of their ability to pay. But the most telling images were simpler. Catherian children playing in parks, their parents walking to work without fear. Elderly beings sitting in the sun reading books that had once been forbidden. The Catherians ruled by making their subjects afraid. Vasquez continued. "We govern by making them partners. Every world in the protection zone has elected representatives. Every citizen has rights that cannot be taken away. Every child receives an education." Dr. Yithmasa, now serving as the Council's expert on human affairs, raised her hand. "Ambassador, what about resistance? Surely some Catherian military leaders oppose your rule?" "Some do," Vasquez acknowledged. "They're welcome to leave and seek their fortunes elsewhere. Those who choose to stay and work for the betterment of their people find that we judge beings by their actions, not their species." She gestured, and the display changed to show a Catherian wearing the uniform of a human peace officer. Former General Klexivor now serves as Chief of Security on Mordek. He was responsible for conquering 12 worlds under the old regime. Now, he's responsible for protecting 12 billion citizens under the new one. The transformation of Klexivor had been remarkable to witness. The same tactical brilliance that had made him a feared conqueror now made him an effective protector. He had thrown himself into his new role with the dedication of a being seeking redemption. "The key," Vasquez explained, "is that we don't try to make them human. We help them become the best version of themselves." Captain Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen and commander of the Terran Defense Fleet, stood to address the assembly. The scars from her battle wounds were still visible, but she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced the worst the galaxy could offer and emerged victorious. "The protection zone is just the beginning," she said. "We've established mutual defense agreements with 37 worlds. The Terran fleet maintains patrol routes covering 63 trade routes. Piracy in those sectors has dropped to nearly zero. The numbers were impressive, but they told only part of the story. The real change was subtler, deeper. For the first time in centuries, smaller worlds could trade and develop without fear of being conquered by stronger neighbors. Scientific research proceeded without military oversight. Art and literature flourished in societies that had once known only war. Ambassador Keltera, now one of humanity's closest allies, spoke from her position near the human delegation. "What strikes me most about our human friends is their approach to strength. Other species use power to take what they want. Humans use power to protect what they love. But not everyone in the galaxy was comfortable with humanity's new role. The delegate from the thermal worlds, their crystalline form glowing with agitation, stood to voice concerns that many shared. "We are grateful for human protection," they said through their translator. "But we must ask, what happens when humans decide they want something we have? What happens when your protection becomes occupation?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. It was the fear that kept many worlds awake at night, the worry that humanity's benevolent protection might one day become something darker. "Admiral," Chen answered with the calm certainty of someone who had looked into her own soul during the darkest days of war. "Then you resist us," she said simply. "You fight us. You make us prove that we deserve your trust." The simplicity of the answer caught many delegates off guard. "You see," Chen continued, "the stories you used to tell about us were right. We are capable of incredible kindness and terrible violence, often in the same person. The difference is choice. Every day, every human in the protection zone chooses to be protectors instead of conquerors. The day we stop making that choice, we stop deserving the trust you've given us." Emperor Zalthek studied the human admiral carefully. "And if that day comes, if humanity becomes what the Cytherians were, then you'll do what we did to the Cytherians," Admiral Chen replied without hesitation. "You'll stop us, and you'll be right to do it." The honesty was breathtaking in its directness. Other species promised eternal friendship, unbreakable alliances, permanent peace. Humans simply promised to keep earning the trust they had been given. Dr. Yithmasa looked around the chamber at the faces of delegates from across the galaxy. Some showed relief, others continued worry, but most reflected a growing understanding. The humans weren't claiming to be perfect, they were claiming to be accountable. "There's something else," Ambassador Vasquez said, her voice becoming more personal. "We've been analyzing the old stories about our people, the ones you collected for thousands of years. We've realized something important." She paused, making sure she had everyone's attention. Every story spoke of individual humans or small groups, travelers, refugees, explorers. You never encountered us as a unified species because we were afraid of what we might become if we worked together. We scattered ourselves across the galaxy to protect others from our potential for both creation and destruction. The chamber was completely silent now. "The attack on the New Horizon changed that," Vasquez continued. "It forced us to reunite, to work together, to become what we had always feared becoming, a unified human civilization. But we learned something in the process." "What did you learn?" asked Dr. Yithmasa quietly. "That unity doesn't have to mean uniformity. That strength doesn't have to mean domination. That the capacity for violence doesn't negate the choice to be gentle." Admiral Chen stepped forward. "The human fleet still patrols our space. Our soldiers still train for war. Our scientists still develop weapons that could crack worlds, but every day we choose to use that strength to build rather than destroy." "And if someone threatens those under our protection?" asked the delegate from the Maritime Federation. Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. "Then they'll learn why the old stories called us legends." As the session ended, delegates filed out of the chamber in small groups, talking quietly among themselves. The galaxy had adapted to humanity's presence, but it was still learning what that presence meant. Dr. Yithmasa approached Ambassador Vasquez as she gathered her materials. "Elena, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever miss the early days, when we thought you were just friendly newcomers?" Vasquez considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," she admitted. "It was simpler then. We could pretend to be something we weren't. But Yith, the children on those Cytherian worlds sleep safely at night now. The trade routes are clear. The strong protect the weak instead of preying on them." She looked out the chamber's great window at the busy spaceport below, where ships from dozens of species moved in peaceful commerce. "We're not the humans we were when we hid in the shadows," she said. "We're not the humans we became when we went to war. We're something new. Something that chooses every single day to be worthy of the trust you've given us." Dr. Yithmasa nodded, understanding more than she had expected. "The legends spoke of humans as forces of nature," she said. "I think I finally understand what that meant." "What did it mean?" "Forces of nature aren't good or evil," Dr. Yithmasa replied. "They just are. Fire can burn down a forest or warm a home. Water can flood a city or give life to crops. You're not good or evil either. You're just human, and that's exactly what the galaxy needs." As Ambassador Vasquez walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council building,